in Virginia. Folks, today we begin Kuntres Achron, the fifth part of Tanya. This part, Kuntres Achron, translated means the last pamphlets. It is, by and large, deeper teachings of more of a Kabbalistic nature, of things in the Zohar, the Eitz Chaim, pre-Eitz Chaim, things from the teaching of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, of the Arizal, that seem to be contradictory with either earlier teachings or contradictory in the teachings themselves, and that the Alter Rebbe will elucidate. I guess they're not part of the regular teachings because they're more in-depth, more nuanced, and as a result, it's remained for this last part. Now, some of it will be, as we said, we'll go along. All right, let's start with the first essay. The first essay, the question that the Alter Rebbe wants to deal with is, how is it the narratives of the Torah should be considered chokhmah ilah, supernal wisdom, that when a person just reads the storyline, let's say of the Parsha, and doesn't understand any deeper meaning in the storyline, how is it that this is divine wisdom? How do we understand that? Of course, every story has a lot of depth to it. It's divine wisdom, supernal wisdom. But if someone is learning it only on such a simplistic level of just a narrative, how do we understand? Now, what we've learned previously is, of course, Torah, divine wisdom, is based on the idea that there's a teaching. So if it's Jewish law, right, that even if it's a law of litigation, that Reuven makes a claim like this and Shimon makes a claim like that, and they're before a court of Jewish law, such and such is the law, that's divine wisdom. We learned that in chapter 5, the first part of Tanya, and we understand that. And we understand also how Tanya, for example, is divine wisdom. But if you're just reading the story, unfortunately, many people take stories as, they're the fables of the Bible, they're the tales of the Bible. And God forbid, obviously, it's not that. But how do we understand that this is indeed divine wisdom when it's just a story being told? Now, we're not talking about that, of course. Behind the story is so much more, right? There's such great depth. We're not talking about behind the story, because we're talking about a person who just learns it unaware of any depth. So how are they connected to supernal wisdom? That's the question. So the Alter Rebbe begins by stating that, quoting from a sefer called Kavanais of the Arizal, that just as like a person who engages in Torah study below, so to the likeness of supernal man, meaning the divine level above, of Adam Ha'elyon, supernal man, also engages in Torah study above. So, we've learned this concept previously, a similar concept at least. So when we learn, we're not just learning, but our likeness in the divine above is also learning. Now, the Alter Rebbe It says, however, that this supernal wisdom is only by virtue of the connection that is of the person's likeness above, but not through the actual study itself. In other words, what you're causing is a likeness above, so the connection to supernal wisdom is not through the study itself, because you're only reading a narrative, but it is to the likeness above. So the Alter Rebbe therefore goes on to state that this is only when the study of the written word remains in the realm of thought. So if you're just reading the story without verbalizing it, so then yes, there is a reflection above of you, or a divine element above, that likeness is also engaged in that study, but it's not the actual Torah study down here, so to speak, it's above. But that's only in thought. If the individual verbalizes, making it audible, right? He said, Ela told us, Yitzchak ben Avram, Hoili did Yitzchak. Very first verse of this week's Torah portion. These are the generations of Yitzchak, the son of Avram. Avram gave birth to Yitzchak. So you verbalize it, you didn't just read it. So then the Alter Rebbe says that verbalizing gives it a different parameter and allows it now to go up to the highest levels of the divine above. So if you were motivated, for example, by like a righteous person in verbalizing the text, so the righteous, they are souls of the world of Atzilus, or completely a chariot, a complete given over, that they are only ridden by a higher source, by the divine, no whim or will of their own. So when they verbalize, there's an ascending of that teachings to the world of Atzilus, to the divine in that world. If a person is motivated by an awareness that brings of godliness, that brings to a love and awe in the individual, in other words, intellectually generated understanding and appreciation of God and godliness, that it brings to a love and awe, so then that learning of the narrative that is verbalized will rise up to the world of Bria. If a person is motivated only by the natural love, not because you used your self-awareness and brought your mind to bring to your heart, but to your natural love, the hidden love, the Ava Mesiteris, is what led you to this study, that's motivated you, and you verbalize the narrative of the Torah portion, not the law, but the narrative. Then it will rise to the world of Yetzirah, world of formation, which is a primarily divine emotions, as opposed to Bria, which is divine intelligence. And then finally, if you're motivated by just doing it, or in other words, Kabbalah Soul, the yoke of heaven, in other words, you're doing it because this is, what you need to do. In other words, there isn't even the natural love of God and love and awe of God that is motivating, but just sort of, a recognition that you got to do what you got to do, right? This is what God wants. So you're a foot soldier without the love and awe, natural love and awe of God that's in the soul, that's revealed. Then it will go and rise up to the divine in the world of Asiya, the world of action. Meaning, it will go there to the divine. There is the 10 divine attributes of that particular world, of every world. This is what happens. So, thinking that brings you to a great devotion will not allow to bring to allow it to go up and to bring down divinity. But when we verbalize, it will allow what we have learned not only to rise, but it'll bring an illumination of divine light that will come back down into this world, increasing the divinity in this world. Again, based on how far up it can reach, based on what is the motivation of that learning, will create a union above, and that union then will bring about a new divine light that will illuminate ourselves and the world around us. That is the basic idea of the first essay. The second essay takes from the Eitz Chaim, from the Arizal, and says that the divine cannot have a union of face-to-face except through mitzvahs that require action. So let me explain. An idea that we've explained previously, that everything is about creating a union in the divine realm in order to beget, to give birth to divine light that will be introduced into this world. You know, E equals MC squared. You can't change anything. You can even only change it from energy to material or material to energy. But there's nothing new under the sun. The only thing that's beyond the sun is Torah mitzvahs. I'm adding a little piece over here. The Alter Rebbe is discussing at this point, but just to give context. The only thing that's beyond, and that is when you do study Torah mitzvahs. So as we just explained about in the first essay about even the narratives, bring this divine light. When we verbalize it, it creates a union and brings that divine light into this world. Now the Alter Rebbe is speaking about action-oriented mitzvahs, that they are required in order that also to create a union above. So before there was Adam and Eve to work this world, the humans to work this world, the divine light above, when it created a union, it didn't do it face to face. The union is between Zoh and Malchus, is the basic union. Zoh, Zer Anpin, small faces, refer to the 6 emotions that are masculine. And Malchus is feminine. So there's a union between masculine, feminine, and divine above. But that union is on the back side. Why? Because a union face-to-face is a very powerful one, and therefore it begets such a powerful divine light that if before creation that there wasn't anyone to work with that, it would, as we'll explain in a moment, it would then allow that divine light to go into Klippa, into a negative place. So what was necessary after Adam was created, that he was given himself, and Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava, La'avdo L'shamra. They had to work and to protect the garden. And for us, now we have 613 mitzvahs. And those 613 mitzvahs have to be done in the physical. Why do they have to be done in the physical? Why can't mitzvahs just be done in a spiritual level? Is because the force of divine light is so great that it can go into a negative place. You know, it's just like the sun can be so powerful, right? Sometimes it can produce, too much and not good stuff. So likewise, the divine light is so powerful that when we do a mitzvah engaged in the physical world, so we're taking a product of the physical world that is klipas noiga, that is a mixture of good and bad. And what do we need to do? We need to trim and hack the thorns. Meaning, we have to take away the negativity of that physical object that we're engaged with and use it in a positive form to connect with God. So whether it's, parchment that comes from a skin of an animal, or whether it's a esrog, the citron fruit, or whatever, or it's a coin, the vitality that is in those physical objects before the doing of a mitzvah is klipa. There's negative forces there. And of course, all things in this world could be used for positive or for negative, for holy or for the opposite. So by using it for the sake of a mitzvah, what you're doing is, again, terminology is here, trimming and hacking off the thorns, which doesn't allow for the nurturing of negativity. Right? If you cut off if you trim and take off the thorns, hack off the thorns will take, like of a thorn bush, right? It's gonna take the nourishment from the ground. It's gonna take the water and use it to create a pricky thorn. Now, we're only using it as a metaphor, so we shouldn't get, that's the way of nature, but that's a metaphor for us to understand that if we don't do a mitzvah in the physical, so then what will happen is that this divine light will go into the physical and will feed the negative forces of klipa, and the thorns will get more pricky and bigger and stronger. So we need to engage in the physical act of the mitzvah, because in the physical, there is a mixture of good and bad. We take away the vitality of the negative force because we're using it for the sake of a mitzvah. And therefore, that act of doing the physical mitzvah in this physical world elicits above a union that will be face to face of Zoh and Malchus, of the masculine and feminine divine qualities above, divine attributes, that now begets new light that will only go into a holy place and not into a negative place. Now, even those mitzvahs that are not involving action, like studying of Torah, prayer, yet we have learned that prayer, for example, if you just think the prayer, you don't fulfill the prayer. You have to actually verbalize the prayer. So the verbalization is that elevation from below of the feminine waters, of the initiation from below, down up, bottom up, right? That when we initiate by taking the things of klipas noiga, because think about it, speech is something that is a power that's given to us by our vital/animal soul, that our speech could be used in a negative manner. So now that we're speaking words of prayer, we're taking the vital force that is in speech, that is klipas noiga, is a mixture of good and bad, and we're hacking away the negativity, elevating it, and creating as a result a union above that brings a new divine light into this world that will go into a place of holiness. And this is, again, done because of our trimming, our pruning, hacking away the negative forces of klipa, that they should not get greater vitality, and therefore the acts of mitzvah have to be action-oriented, or those that don't have an action, like prayer, They have to be verbalized in speech because that is considered like an action. And then we bring that divine light into this world. That is first two essays. It's a little more esoteric, mystical. I hope I explained that well. Alice is asking, isn't thinking mentioned in Tanya that it's higher than speaking? It depends on what reference. Thinking is more, it's higher expression of the person, right? Because what, you know, where your thoughts are, that's really where you are. So for example, you know, you could be maybe tuned in right now to this tiny class, but really your thoughts are elsewhere. It's really where the thoughts of the person, the Baal Shem Tov says, that's where the person is, because the soul is the person. The thoughts of the person are the closest thing to the soul than speech, because you could say one thing and not mean it, right? You could say one thing but not mean it. So therefore, it's not a true expression of you. But your thoughts are. That's a true expression of you. Much truer. So that yes, so it's higher in that respect, but it's not higher in bringing down the divine light of God into this world. Thoughts isn't higher. Speech is. Speech will pierce above, because it is that verbalization that pierces above. Now, your thoughts, if they're, you know, are also important, because your thoughts, you know, you can say the words of prayer, but your thoughts also have to be, you know, attuned to those prayers. So yes, both are necessary. But to whittle away, to hack away at the negative forces of this world, thought is not sufficient. We have to express it and verbalize it when it comes to prayer, for example, or comes to the physical act of a mitzvah, because that's where the negative forces of Klipas Nega reside, and therefore we need to engage in that. Hope that was clear. Okay, Mira and Chana. Okay, another time. Good. Jason from Montreal, welcome. Sarah Malka from North Carolina, welcome. All right. All right, folks. Just to be aware that at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time is the Kinnis HaShluchim Great Banquet, the great event. You should please tune into it. You can get it through here, Chabad.org. You can get it, I'm going to post it on Messenger, so everybody can tune in. Very important. This is Shluchim, the Rebbe's emissaries from around the world, gathering around the world, because I did not go into New York, and people did not go into New York. They're in their place, bringing the light of Torah, mitzvahs, chassidus, Rebbe's teachings to where they are. So tune in today, 1 o'clock. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zechin Kedeshim in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Private message me your emails for those who have yet not done that.